Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to get things going here in just a moment, so if you haven't found a seat yet, feel free to come on in. Welcome to our Adventures in Learning. Great to have you all here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Rod Johnson. I'm the director of Shepherd Center, and we got, I think, a very interesting program for you today. And at the end, we're going to top it off with a delicious meal of Swedish meatballs and all the trimmings, so we got that to look forward to. Before we get to the first speaker, a couple of announcements. We've got a lot going on right now at Shepherd Center, which is good. And we are so excited this year about our fundraising concert. Caitlin Smith is coming back home for an exciting concert, and that's going to be on Saturday, May 16th. Tickets are going fast, so don't miss out. Get your tickets before they are gone. They are being sold right now at Schofield Drug and at Shepherd Center, and then you can buy them online as well. So there's a place to buy them online if you wanted to put it on a credit card. But $35 each is the cost. This is Shepherd Center's major fundraising event of the year. And Caitlin Smith, of course, is from Cannon Falls. She grew up here. She's a graduate of Cannon Falls High School. She's a very successful singer-songwriter, now based in Nashville. If you've heard the song Can't Make Old Friends, recorded by Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton, she wrote that. She also wrote songs for Garth Brooks and for Rascal Flatts, and now she's performing, and she has a new EP out called Everything to You. So she's going to be a lot of fun to have here. She's actually touring. She's starting out, I think, in Nashville, and then she's going to Alabama, and then she's going to Mississippi, and then she's going to Florida, and then she's coming up here to Minnesota on May 16th. So looks like a sellout. Like I say, don't delay. Get your tickets before they're gone. It's going to be a lot of fun. And something else we started at Shepherd Center, 500. We started, well, let's see who wants to play 500. It's been very successful. We've had a lot of folks come and play 500. It's been a lot of fun. So we're kind of doing this every month now. And our next 500 card playing will take place on Monday, May 4th. So Monday, May 4th, you want to play 500, you're more than welcome to come to Shepherd Center from 12:30 to 3 is when we usually play 500. So that'll be Monday, May 4th. And if you want to come, let us know. We'll make sure we got enough tables set up. And we have 2 trips that are planned as well this year. We will first be going to Nashville on August 30th through September 5th. Going to Nashville. Of course, we're going to take tours. We're going to see shows. We'll go to the Grand Ole Opry. We'll check out the Country Music Hall of Fame. And that, again, is end of August, August 30th through September 5th. We have brochures on this, by the way, on the table in the back there. So grab a brochure on Nashville. Or if you want to go to San Antonio, or both. We're going to San Antonio November 14th through November 22nd. And we'll have guided tours of San Antonio. Stop by the LBJ Ranch, the Alamo, the Riverwalk, all kinds of good things to see in San Antonio. So those are the 2 trips we have. Brochures, information on both of those trips in the back of the room. And pick one up if you're interested and take it home with you. Take a couple if you'd like. Right now, we have a special guest here that has an announcement to make. Would you please welcome the head coach of the Cannon Falls Boomers is here. Come on up, Coach.
We have a recruiting mission. Okay, so look around here. If you're over 60, you're qualified to play with us. We're going to start May, the first Tuesday in May. That's May 5th. And the way we do this, everybody, down at Archie Swenson Field 1, down at the, you guys call it the dump, but the sanitation area. Archie Swenson Field is the technical name. We play on Field 1 at 10 o'clock every Tuesday, starting in May. And that'll go through July. So if you would like to play, contact me. There's handouts on the back table about Boomer softball. Last year we had 27 players. We had 5 women playing. It was very successful. The main idea behind this is physical activity. So what we do, we meet down there, kind of going back to elementary days, everybody. Pick a couple captains and we pick sides and we play. So it's not too serious. However, we do plan to play Northfield a couple times, Northfield Senior Center, and we plan to play the Owatonna Senior Center a couple times. We did last year too. But the main thrust of this is for everybody to come down, get a little running and jogging in, and catch a ball and hit a ball, revised rules. There's no sliding and things like that. You can have a substitute runner to first even if you're a batter. Somebody can substitute run for you. So there's revised rules. We try to keep it so no one gets injured. You know, you play at your own speed. I don't get on you too hard if you're not trying real hard. So it's meant to be a physical activity, and it was very successful last year, and we hope it will be. I know it will be this year. People have been talking about it throughout the community. How many have heard people talk about Bloomer softball? There's quite a few hands. So if you can't play and you know somebody that would like to play, pass this brochure on to them. We're going to charge a small fee this year. We're talking like $10, right, Rod? And that fee will be used to buy bats and balls, you know, and get some equipment that we need. We need a ball bag, we need a bat bag, and we always have to get new balls because they wear out. And so think about it, everybody, and we use the regulation softball. It's slow pitch. Okay. You do have to have your own glove, but even if you don't own a glove, you can borrow one from somebody when they're in the field, so it's not that big a problem. So we hope you might consider it, pass the word on to everybody, and make it a successful summer, everybody. Thank you.
And Jim Nelson provided the shirts, right? Yeah, so you get a cool shirt, too. Maybe eventually it goes south for spring training. That'd be kind of fun. I've actually had people say, I can't wait till I'm 60 so I can play. So that's a lot of fun. I urge you to take part if you want. It's really a lot of fun. So yeah, I told you we got a lot of things going on at Shepherd Center. Rosie wanted me to mention it's the time of year to look for the dwarf trout lily. Yes, it's that time of year. Is it happening like real soon or right now? Or it's budding. Okay. I think that's it for the reminders. We're ready for our first speaker. He's from the Animal Health Clinic here in Cannon Falls. Received his BS degree in chemistry and math in 1972 from the University of Great Falls, Montana. In 1985, he founded the Animal Health Center in downtown Cannon Falls, moving to the present location in 1995. And this morning, he's going to speak on pet adoption and also, I'm sure, share some stories from his many years as a veterinarian. So would you please welcome Mr. Mike Pedersen. Mike, are you here? There he is. Come on down. And thank you for being here.
My name is Dr. Michael Pedersen. I've been a veterinarian in this town since about 1977. We came down, Dr. Winter and I came down and purchased the practice from Dr. Gracie that's out there on County Road 24, which is a church now. And him and I practiced together out there until '85, and then I went downtown into the old Lampert lumber yard and practiced there until '95, and then I moved out to the north end of town then, and we're still there now. So it's been an interesting run. Had a lot of fun in this town. Town's been very good to me. Yes, ma'am.
We have a request that you use the mic.
Okay.
We're having trouble hearing. Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry. But we started out, well, a little bit on my background, first of all. I'm from a pretty large family. There was 9 of us, 7 boys and 2 girls. And my daddy worked for the federal government, so we moved every couple of 3 years. I was born in Omaha. We lived there, Grand Island, Nebraska, Alliance, Nebraska, Boise, Idaho, Grand Junction, Colorado, Trinidad, Colorado, and then we moved to Montana in 1960, and that's where the majority of the family still is today. I left Montana in 1972 to head down to Fort Collins, Colorado, the home of Colorado State University, where I did my veterinary training down there. And then I graduated in June of 1976, and then I went down to Texas A&M at College Station, Bryant, Texas, to do a large animal internship from 76 to 77. And then moved up here to Minnesota in the fall of 1977. Dr. Winter and I started out up in Inver Grove Heights, working there, and then Dr. Dracy, we had done work for Dr. Dracy, and he was kind of in the mood to sell out, so we came down here and bought that practice, and I've been in the town ever since. So it's been interesting to see, you know, not only how my profession changed, but also how, you know, the surrounding community has changed. When we first started practicing down here, we did, it had to have been 90% large animals, which consisted of horses and cattle, and of course in this area here, primarily dairy cattle. Well, today, I probably do 75% small animals, and the rest of that is, the other 25% is horses, and then I do a lot of work with you know, these so-called camelids, the llamas and alpacas. And it's quite an interesting business in itself. But along with this change, you know, the profession has changed tremendously. We have, you know, when I first got out of school, you know, diagnostic work was almost minimal. You know, we just didn't have the sophistication and the equipment, because the majority of the equipment available was made for human beings. And a lot of our animals don't fit into that category. Some things do, some things don't. And then, of course, over time, that has drastically changed. And also, because of the fact that a lot of our work at that point in time was on the farm, you can't hardly, number one, take the equipment with you, and number two, doing your diagnostic work, you know, drawing your samples, going back to your clinic, getting the lab work done, then going back to the farms, it was too time consuming. And so it was never really done much of at that point in time. Nowadays it's a whole new world. And not only from that standpoint, but you know, you get into the so-called food animal production side of veterinary medicine. You know, you're talking about your dairy cows, your beef cows, your hogs, you know, chickens, turkeys, all of these, you know, product producing animals. The level of sophistication that has occurred over the last 10 to 15 years is frightening. And that is one reason why a lot of these practices are becoming somewhat specialized. You know, this practice does horse work, this practice does cattle work. Because the sophistication has gotten to a point where an average person can't do it all. You can, but it might be a little bit sketchy in the spots. And so by so-called, you know, specializing in one species, or you know, then you can, you know, learn a lot more and also do a better service for your clients. And that's, you know, that's kind of the whole premise behind what we do. You know, we try to do the best we can for our clients, and through education and specialization is one of the ways that occurs. On the lines of specialization, right now in veterinary medicine, there is almost as high or a higher level of specialization than there is in the human field. We're getting, you know, we've got board certified surgeons, board certified internal medicine people that specialize in cardiology, you know, stomach and intestinal problems, cancer. I mean, it's as, you know, specialized as the human field is. And because of that, there are some issues that we have, just like they do in the human fields. You have a hell of a time getting into seeing them, and we're starting to see that now in a lot of these referral practices, because of the fact that more and more clients are demanding it. You know, these pets of theirs, and well, and then you get into some of your large animals, your horses. Some of these horses are worth a tremendous amount of money. They're performance horses. They, end up being, breeding animals eventually if their performance history it warrants it. So these animals are worth a lot of money, so people are willing to pay a lot to find things, out that people like me can't, because we don't have, the instrumentation or the sophistication and training to diagnose and or treat some of these problems. And so that part of our field is has caught up with the human field real rapidly. And that has been kind of the interesting thing. Like I said, I graduated in school in 1976, so I'm coming up on almost 40 years of being in practice. And it's really interesting when I look back at the changes that I have seen in those 40 years, along, running it up alongside of the human medicine. And in fact, I was at a meeting here, I don't know, about a month ago down in Rochester. Some of the work being done, research being done on cancer therapy in veterinary medicine is years ahead of what's going on in the human field. And what I assume is going on is that it's being tracked real heavily by the human side, because a lot of the tumors and stuff that our animals get occur in people. And so a lot of these products will probably eventually be into the human field also. But it's weird, because 20 years ago, the human field was so much further ahead than the veterinary field was. And so it's been, like I said, it's been really kind of fun to watch, to watch the how our field has caught up in some areas, and in some areas actually surpassed, stuff in the human field. And it makes you, it's interesting, because, the changes that have occurred have just, skyrocketed in the last probably 15 years. The change was, it was slow the first 25 years of my practice. But here in the last 10 to 15 years, the change is so rapid that lots of times it's almost impossible to keep up. And that's where, these so-called referral centers have gotten to be so nice to have available, because you know that there's something wrong, or that there's a treatment, but either you can't find out what's wrong, or in a lot of ways you can't afford to have the products needed for one animal. And so by sending it to the referral centers, everybody ends up in good shape. The client does, the patient does, and everybody's happy. And that's been, kind of the fun part. The biggest problem is, though, we're sitting in kind of in some ways, a very unique area, because we're halfway between the Twin Cities and Rochester, but also most of the referral centers are up in the cities, or there are some in Rochester, and it's a trip. It isn't like driving 4 or 5 miles across town to come to my clinic. We use a referral center up in Eden Prairie. It's a good hour-and-a-half drive one way from here. But we have a lot of people that are willing to, to use it. And so it's been quite an advancement, and also an enjoyment, because by referring, we also learn. Granted, I'm not going to try and do some of the things that they do, but at least you know what's done and how it's done and what needs to be done. And therefore, the next time an animal comes in, you have that knowledge available for the client, and then the option is there too. So that, the small animal part of veterinary medicine has always been a lot different because of the fact that they're small. You know, you've got a 10-pound dog with a broken leg. You know, that's easy to fix. You have a 1,200-pound horse with a broken leg, that's a whole new world. But it can be done nowadays a lot better and easier than it could be 10, 15 years ago. And so there's always, you know, it's amazing, the options are out there. There's two things or several things that dictate if it's viable. And the number one option is, and unfortunately, it's the biggest part of our world, and that's money. And I mean, that's, you know, veterinary care is discretionary income. So you know, you're sitting here and you've got children to feed or a sick animal. What are you going to do? Okay. So the number one criteria that limits a lot of what we do in our animals is money. That's the biggest thing. Because you start fixing, oh hell, you fix a broken leg on a dog. You know, I just did one here the other day. You know, you're looking, and we're not done yet, but we're up over $2,500 on the leg on this dog. Okay, now you get into a broken leg on a horse, and you're talking 10,000 or more easily, and then you're not guaranteed anything. You know, the old man designed horses to walk on 4 legs, and when they don't, other things go wrong, and that's one of the big problems. You know, and that is the other side of some of these conditions, is the type of the animal that you're dealing with. You know, this dog that I fixed was a 55-pound sled dog. You know, this dog can be confined, and, you know, it's going to do fine. But you got a 1,200-pound horse, you know, you can't pick him up and just carry him around. You know, and it's hard to keep them quiet because lots of times, you know, they're not used to being in a box stall, and they start getting tired of being in a box stall. And so it gets to be the aftercare on a lot of these procedures also gets to be a huge factor in deciding whether they're going to do it or not do it. And so it's you know, frustrating not only for us but for the clients. And you know, it's hard to see clients struggle with some of the decisions that they make. And of course, you know, one of the favorite questions that we get asked on numerous times is, what would you do if it was your pet or your horse or what have you? And unfortunately, that's a question that there's not a right answer to. Because whatever answer I make is going to be the wrong one. Because if I say put it to sleep, then they're going to say, well, God, you know, why do you want to kill my animal? You know, and if I say, well, let's fix it, they're going to say, well, geez, that's a lot of money. So it gets to be a tough deal, and it's, you know, it's tough to watch, you know, some of these clients go through this decision making, because you can see that it's tearing them up, because they want to do it, but yet, you know, they can't afford it, and it gets to be really, really a tough part of it. And along those same lines, there are, you know, the insurance business has gotten into veterinary medicine. And it's not, the insurance plans aren't like what we get. They're not health insurance plans like we get. They're more like your automobile insurance, where there's a deductible and they'll cover certain things and a part of certain things. So it's a little bit different, and it isn't, in the Midwest, it's not real popular yet. You know, on both coasts, it's going pretty good. It's starting to get more and more popular in the Midwest, but it's been slow. And you know, we don't have a tremendous number of clients that you know, have insurance. And some of the dealings with the insurance companies that I have had have been kind of interesting. But it's there. In fact, I just saw today that one of the very first veterinary insurance companies is owned by Nationwide now. And I thought that was kind of interesting because evidently they're seeing something in this insurance game, or they wouldn't be, you know, expanding from, you know, they're from the human side into the veterinary medicine side. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But it is definitely an option that's out there, and in some ways it has really helped out for a lot of people, and of course a lot of pets, because that kind of pays for some of these problems that they normally couldn't afford to have done. But also, you know, with this, you know, advancement in our field, you know, the food production side of it is, I don't know how many of y'all have been keeping track of the news, but we have this avian influenza hitting this state, and I mean, it's hitting it hard. And it's primarily over on the western half of the state, North and South Dakota, but they did just close down a hen laying operation over in Wisconsin, and that was 200,000 birds in that operation, and all the turkey farms out in western Minnesota. The last number I saw is 1.6 million birds have been destroyed, and it's not, and they're saying we're not even haven't hit the high spot yet. So I mean, we're still on the way up on this mess, and this is one of those. Yes, Jim?
What's the percentage overall of that many turkeys, and you know, how many turkeys are there in the state?
That part I don't know. Oh. But Minnesota is number one in turkey production. I do know that. And we're the number one state as far as production, and it's primarily, you know, in the western part of the state, because they had, I think they've had 14 farms quarantined, and you know, a lot of them are 30, 40, 50, 60,000. One of them was 130,000 birds. So I mean, they're big. Yes, Laura?
If they find a farm and they quarantine it, do they have to destroy all of the birds on that farm?
Yes, yes. That's unfortunately is the only way of eliminating a lot of the so-called carriers. See, and that's the biggest thing that is hard to determine on a lot of these diseases is you have the ones that actually get the disease and die, but you also have ones that have the disease that are normal, that are shedding those viruses, and that's what contaminates, you know, from one place to the other. And of course, the thing too is wind drift and you know, people coming and going. I mean, it's a mess. It really is. So, yes, sir.
So how do they sanitize the farm then, or whatever they have to do?
One of the best ways of sanitizing it is depopulating it and leaving it, because the virus needs to have something to live in, and they're only alive for so long. We have, well, a classic example. Of course, y'all. There's been last couple of years, there's been an outbreak in the horse industry of a viral infection that is normally causes respiratory problems or abortions. That's the normal way we see it. But it has also shows up as a neurological problem that is bizarre, because it starts at the back end of the horse and works its way forward. So lots of times the first thing that we'll see with this, and when we see this form of it, is some of these horses might be dribbling urine, or their back end gets a little sway like this. They're normal as can be. And then all of a sudden they go down, and when you have a horse down, especially with the back legs paralyzed, that's a mess. That's a huge mess. But the thing that's amazing about this deal is that we've had it pop up. It started, one of the first outbreaks we had started at a big reining horse competition in Utah. And before anybody knew what the heck was going on, the competition was over, and these horses went all over the United States, back to their farms. And that was a huge mess. But it could have been solved really easily had people just paid attention. You stay home for 45 days, and it's over. Because the virus doesn't live that long outside of the body. Yes, ma'am?
Well, then why can't they do the same with the turkeys and have people, restrict people going and coming from that
Oh, they do.
farm and have them wear protective gear or whatever, and then they wouldn't have to kill so many?
Well, the reason, yeah, but see, once a farm has been infected, the barn door's been left open. If you shut the barn door, it's too late already.
Oh, okay.
You've got to depopulate and let that virus die off. Then repopulate. But you're right, the biosecurity on some of these big operations like this and the hog industry, which had that, huge diarrhea disease, the last couple of years, the biosecurity on some of these farms is unbelievable. It is amazing how sophisticated it is, because that's exactly what they do. Everything is limited as to what can come and go. In fact, they claim that a lot of these diseases are brought in by feed trucks and stuff like that, and that's something that you've got to have. But they have ways now of unloading that truck, over at the next county, so they don't have to have that vehicle in their facility. Because when you have confinement operations, like these big turkey farms, these laying operations, hog farms, even some of these big horse stables, when you have confinement like that, you have a lot of animals in very close contact with each other. And so most of these viruses are spread through so-called nose-to-nose contact, or if one of them should happen to sneeze, then it's aerosolized and it goes around, and the next ones inhale it, and so that's when you have confinements, that these type of diseases, spread rapidly.
So are those farms who don't have this flu virus in them yet, the bird farms,
Mm-hmm.
are they able to employ enough biosecurity measures to prevent this from happening?
Well,
And is it financially?
well, yeah, it is financially sound. When you lose 200,000 birds, that's a lot. That's a lot. But one of the things too is that the biggest thing that they can't protect themselves against are the migrating birds. Okay, and that's why we're in what's called the Central Flyway, where birds migrating from Canada, go through here all the way down to the Delta in Louisiana, and then their track back is the same way. See, and that is what is bringing this virus in here. But it is spread. But it also can be spread from unit to unit by people, vehicles, stuff like that. So yeah, they're pretty strict. It's amazing how, but that's the one thing that they can't protect against, are the migrating birds.
46 million turkeys produced annually in Minnesota. 46 million.
So that's a lot of birds. Yeah, Paul.
Who absorbs the loss? The farmer, or they have insurance on that?
I assume that they're insured, Paul. But most of them are, because it isn't. I mean, there's not only a mess like this that can affect them. There's other diseases that aren't as as contagious from unit to unit as this is. But there are diseases where they can lose a lot of birds in a hurry. Or like in some of these feedlots, for cattle or sheep. I mean, rapid death loss is not an uncommon thing, and yeah, most of them are insured. So. Yes, Rosie.
Ferndale sent out an email recently and said that they appreciate all the concern, that they're doing fine. The thing is, we have a young relative who, I don't know how many turkeys he's got down in Hanscom, Minnesota, and the heat affected them, and he lost 100,000, turkeys. And you can say that insurance covers it, but this young man stood out there, it was on the television, and he was crying. So, it's, insurance can help you, but this is your livelihood and you've worked so hard with it. So.
Well, right, because you know, it's one thing to be financially compensated, but lots of times that doesn't cover the whole gamut of the loss. I mean, you've got employees that are going to be unemployed, and also it's going to be a while before you can repopulate. And then once you repopulate, it's going to be a while till you send them off to market. So I mean, it's a huge loss, and we've seen it. We've seen it in with that diarrhea outbreak in the pigs the last couple of years. I forget how many millions of baby pigs died in southern Minnesota, and I mean, that's why your bacon was up there around $5-6 a pound. It just is a tremendous economic hit for everybody, and it's going to be interesting to see where the price of turkeys go to, because that's always been a relatively inexpensive, meat to eat and stuff like that, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. So, yes, Laura.
Has there always been disease in the food production animals, but it's changed over time because of the big farming practices?
Yes and no. I mean, it's like this Asian flu that these birds have got going on with the turkeys. I'm sure that it wasn't, in this country. It came in somehow or another.
Okay, but we had other kinds of disease that used to run its gambit in the past?
Oh yeah, there always has been, and there always will be. And like I've said though, when you get into confinement, okay, it definitely changes. What we call the morbidity of a disease process because of all the close contact. But then on the other side of the coin, this confinement and these big farm operations aren't all bad either. I mean, there's one thing that's happening in this country. Farm ground is disappearing hand over fist, okay? And that's something that we can't make anymore. We can't make ground. And so what is happening is that the farmers, the livestock producing people have got to be able to produce what they need to on a smaller area. So how do you do that? You confine them. Now, you take when I first started here, I was thinking about that this morning. When I first started here, all the little family dairy farms that was in this country, they were 40, 50, 60 cow herds. And they were all over this county. Now there is probably, I don't know, it'd be interesting. I should try to find out how many dairy farms now are in Goodhue County. There's not many of them, but I'll guarantee you there's probably 3 times as many cattle, dairy cows, in Goodhue County than there was 10 years ago. That's for the same reason, because of confinement. Now, the thing about confinement is that you can usually take care of that animal a lot better because they're fed better. The insect control, the fly control is a huge thing, and that's so much better in these confinement operations. The weather doesn't get to be as big of a factor because these houses are designed for proper ventilation. They're designed for air movement. And if you see some of these outfits, they got these curtains on the side of them, and they're electronically controlled through, when it gets so hot inside that building, those curtains start going up, the fans start coming on. And so, I mean, these confinement operations, I know a lot of people, they have, a fit over the fact that these animals are locked up. Well, you walk into a lot of these, like some of these big dairy barns and stuff, and these cattle are laying in these free stalls. They're laying on a bed I'd like to lay on. you know, and they're laying there just as content as can be. They're not covered in manure, you know, they're not, you know, got flies stuck all over them. They're laying there chewing their cuds. They're as happy as they can be. And the reason that that is such an important factor is they're going to produce more milk that way. If they're miserable and they're out running around trying to keep the flies off of them, trying to stay cool, you know, they're in the mud holes, their milk production is not going to be there. So it just, you know, they just do better. And nowadays these confinement operations, they are designed to, it isn't like, okay, I got a barn, I'm going to put 50 cows in there. That's not how they're designed. They're designed like, okay, I have 100 cows, I'm going to build a building for 100 cows. Because you've got to have what's called bunk space for them to eat at, you've got to have enough room for them to lay down, you got to have ways of cleaning them to keep all the manure and the mud and everything out of there. You've got to have ways of watering them and fly control, and like a lot of these big confinement operations for like dairy cattle, they got misters in them. And when it gets so hot, this real fine watery mist comes out and wets these cattle down and cools them down. And it's so they're a highly sophisticated structure. It isn't just like an old building that I'm going to stuff a bunch of animals into. And because that doesn't work. We found that out a long time ago. One of the just to give you an example, I don't know how many of y'all have ever been down to Kentucky, those old tobacco drying sheds. You know, they had slats in the walls this open. You know, and that's where when the horse industry really got rolling, that's what they turned those old tobacco drying sheds into. Were barns. Never had a lick of trouble. All that wind going through those buildings kept everything going good. Foals never got sick. Everybody was doing fine. So then we start thinking, you know, we're smart. Let's start building these fancy buildings. So we start building all these big fancy barns and not thinking. And now we got foals dying, you know, foals sick, and same way with the dairy cattle, same thing. Calves dying, calves sick, and if you get a dairy calf that develops pneumonia, gets damaged lungs, that animal's not going to produce milk as good as it should have, and so that's a huge economic loss. And so then, you know, everybody started thinking, well, geez, you know, we got this nice big fancy shed here, and then there's this old beat up tobacco drying shed here. How come things are different? It's ventilation. And so now everybody got smart and started deciding how they were going to move air, you know, in these buildings to keep the air fresh, keep everything going right. And you know, we learned over time. But like I said, nowadays these confinement operations are highly sophisticated structures. In fact, I'm sure all of you know about old Dr. John Anderson that died here about 10 years ago. He was one of the pioneers in designing ventilation systems for these buildings, him and Dr. Bates from the U of M. And when we first started going around to some of these farms with him, I mean, these people looked at us like we had just flown in from Mars. You know, what do you mean I got to have all this air moving and you know, God, I can't afford to heat that in the wintertime and this and that. And I remember going into some of these show horse barns where they had them locked up so tight, you know, you had moisture running down the walls of the box stalls. You couldn't hardly breathe in there after about 5 minutes. The ammonia level was so high in there, you could hardly breathe. And it's, you know, that is a horribly toxic substance to breathe. You know, we finally started convincing these people that we had to, you know, start opening the doors up and turning the fans on, and when we started doing that, you know, these animals started doing a lot better. So, but it's some of this stuff. It's been fun because I think sometimes we think we're a little smarter than we are, and then it takes a little bit of you know, kind of have a disaster occur where you start thinking that, you know, maybe we better start looking at other things and getting other people in, and that's one of the things that's happening now, probably more so in the food production side of veterinary medicine, on these big dairy farms. I mean, there's, years ago the veterinarian, was their nutritionist, he was their the reproduction specialist, their feed, their herd health guy, design buildings. Not anymore. I mean, these guys, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of veterinarians that specialize in those areas. And that's what we're starting to see now in a lot of this food production, is that there are groups that have a lot of different types of veterinarians on their staff. And therefore they can cover the whole gamut for these big producers. Because when I first moved here in 1977, dairy cattle were fed hay, corn silage, corn, and soybeans. Nowadays, you would not believe what they eat, because everything is done on a cost basis. We're feeding cottonseed hulls for fiber now, instead of always feeding them hay. And so a lot of these different commodities now that are being used were never used 20 years ago. But because everything is done on a best cost scenario, you want to get the most production out of your animals at the least cost. And that's where a lot of these, I mean, like I said, it's a whole new world now. I couldn't even begin to think about, what going in and helping out at the dairy farm, because that nutrition has gotten to be so big. And I mean, they get in all these products, and with Red Wing being right here, a lot of it comes up out of the south on the barges. And so we're fortunate that we have an access to other type of feedstuffs than what people do in Texas or Oklahoma. But they don't have the same access as we do. So then it's got to be trucked, and then it's more expensive. Yes, ma'am.
With the increased technology with lab services and x-ray and all that kind of thing, do you feel that you have retained your clinical diagnostic still with just hands-on with animals? And do you think that the newer vets coming out are going to have less of those skills because they're maybe relying too much on technology?
Yes. No, you are right. You are right. Because it is, when some of this new technology was just becoming available. When I was getting out of school in '76. Okay, when we were students, we would do our exams and kind of tell the professor what our thoughts were. And then he'd say, well, what do you want to do? Well, back then we had a clinical chemistry piece of equipment that was called the High Cell 17, and it did 17 different tests. And we'd say, well, we want to do one of those. And the next thing that professor said is, which one of those tests? Because you couldn't. It was cost prohibitive to run one test on that machine. So it was so much cheaper to do all 17 of them. But our professors would say, okay, which tests are you wanting to look at, and what are you expecting? Okay. Now, and this really isn't a. I don't know how to exactly say this, but it nowadays we have a saying that's called standard of care. Okay, and this is what is expected of us to do, as far as and each disease process or whatever procedure that we do has a certain standard that we should attain. And that has created a lot of what you're talking about. You go in and you look at an animal, he's running a fever, he's a little bit depressed, his abdomen's a little bit tender. Well, hell, let's go x-ray him, do an ultrasound, run blood tests and what have you. You can't hardly miss. Well, I shouldn't say that, but and the reason that that's done is because that is what is expected to be done. And if we don't do it, then and something goes wrong, you know, then they kind of say, well, Jesus, you know, you didn't do the standard of care. And so, yeah, the diagnostic skills are definitely not what they used to be. This is very true, very true. And in some ways it's kind of sad, but I don't know if it really changes the you know, the outcome or the care of the animal. It's just that, you know, some of these older clinicians and stuff, I remember when I was a student even, I mean, some of these guys were phenomenal, but they could, you know, determine from a physical exam. And I mean, you would just sit there in awe. But,
Well, I think of the parallel in human medicine as well.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Same type of situation.
Right, right. But it definitely changed. Yes, ma'am?
Mike, do you anticipate that, on the news recently, they've been talking about the flu that is spreading in dogs throughout the Midwest, and they said they thought it came from Asia, and the dogs are not capable of fighting it off, and some of them have died. Do you anticipate that spreading into Minnesota at some point as well?
Well, there's two things, Joyce. Number one, that form of the canine influenza virus is not one that we've seen before, okay? There has been canine influenza outbreaks probably over the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And they usually show up at these big dog shows or these big kennels or what have you. But the vaccine that's out there is highly effective for that form of canine influenza. But the one that's going on in Chicago right now, that vaccine, they don't think works at all. And so you're kind of at a loss now. We're kind of behind the 8 ball because this is a whole new virus. And you know, it came out as being a canine influenza virus. Well, then they've been doing some work and they've gotten it, you know, labeled a little bit tighter, and it's came in out of Asia, but it's not related. I mean, it's not in that same family as what we've got the vaccine for. And so do I expect it here? You always worry about that because our animals travel with us a lot. When I was a student in Colorado, heartworm disease was never really thought of in the state of Colorado. Number one, you don't have mosquitoes. And you know, but when I left there in '76, we were starting to see it. And I mean, right now, there probably isn't a state that it's not in. And a lot of that's because of the fact that we travel with our pets as much as we do. You know, you're going to go on vacation, the dog jumps in there with you, and away you go. And so you're taking, you know, and I mean, it's no different than us. I mean, you sit and think about it right now. There's not a place we can't be in this world in 24 hours. There's not a place we can't be. That used to be the defense of diseases, was travel. I mean, when you had to take the boat from Europe to here, hell, if you were sick, you were dead before you got here. So, I mean, that solved the problem. But I mean, even with any of the other diseases, is that distance has always been, you know, our friend. But like I said, nowadays, you can be any place you want to in this world in 24 hours. And so a lot of these diseases are getting spread around that we've never seen before and don't have any, you know, experience with and or immunity. So, yeah, Paul.
I was wondering on the use of antibiotics in feed. I know 30, 40 years ago, John Anderson was trying to get antibiotics out of some of the feed that was just standard, and losing the ability of the antibiotics to fight, or become super viruses and stuff. What is going on in the antibiotic?
Okay, number one, antibiotics won't do anything for viruses. That's the sad part. We don't have anything. About the only antiviral drug that, well, there's some of them that are out there, but the majority of viruses, you know, there's no, you know, so-called medication that's going to work with them. But the antibiotics in the feed are definitely being cut back substantially for that reason alone. I mean, the biggest reason that they were put in production animal feed wasn't to treat diseases at all. It was put in there to increase performance, to have them, you know, gain, you know, more weight on less amount of feed. And that was the whole reason behind the antibiotics in the feed. Because as a rule, it's hard to get enough. And then, of course, certain antibiotics in certain animals won't pass the stomach. So they're not really effective. So, but that's been a big issue that they're working on, and it's getting less and less every year in the feeds. So, yeah, Joyce.
Can you tell us a little bit about Cannon Falls Pet Adoption and its functions?
Oh yeah, we have been associated with an adoption agency there in Cannon Falls that we don't house many of the animals at the clinic anymore. We use them. We use foster homes for them. But basically, you know, we get in strays, you know, cats, dogs. We check them over and make sure they're healthy. You know, any of the, you know, we also make sure they're spayed or neutered. If they're not, then we go ahead and do that. And then we put them back out into the foster homes and put them up for adoption. And, you know, we went to using the internet for kind of like advertising these cats and dogs, and it's I don't know who sponsors it, Joyce. Is that Purina that backs that petfinder.com?
I think so.
Yeah, it's a website called petfinder.com, and you type that in, and then they'll ask you your zip code. And if you put your zip code in, then it'll tell you, you know, where, you know, what's available in your area. And that has been a godsend for us. I mean, we have been able to adopt just a tremendous number of animals, you know, through that program. And the thing is that not everybody that calls up and wants a pet gets one either. I'll guarantee you that. So the people that are involved with that pet adoption are pretty selective about who they're going to send, you know, those animals home with. So it's been a real good thing. You know, the most frustrating part about it is that it, you know, all the spay and neutering that we have done, and in fact we've even gone into the trailer parks here and with, you know, with the owners helping us, have gone through what they call these trap, neuter, and release programs, where we catch all these feral cats and spay and neuter them and vaccinate them and then put them back out, and we just don't get to seem like we're even beginning to stem the tide. It just seems like for every 2 we turn loose, 4 of them show up. So it gets to be really, that's got to be probably the most frustrating part about it.
I don't know.
Well, one of the things that has changed is that a lot of this feed isn't even touched anymore. I mean, it's all mechanized. It's just unbelievable because, I mean, number one, you're dealing with, you know, like in some of these big dairies, you know, they're milking 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 head of cattle, you know, and also all of that feed is measured to them. You know, it's augured into great big, you know, storage containers, and numerous ones throughout. A lot of it depends upon how they feed them. I mean, I've seen some things, you know, because I haven't been involved in the dairy business for quite a few years now. But I mean, I've seen some of these feeding programs. When I was getting out of the dairy program, they were getting into these feeding systems where the cattle wore a necklace, okay, and they had a magnetic chip in that necklace. They would walk up to this feed bunk, and there was a scanner there, and it would read that. And then it would dump out so much feed for that cow.
But what I'm saying is, if it's not handled, I mean, if these people were getting, you know, rashes and sick from this feed, sure, if you're not handling it, isn't it still the same thing?
Well, yeah, but the thing is too is that some of that stuff isn't just all the antibiotics. Because I mean, the amount of antibiotics that are in some of these feeds, you know, you're talking, you know, 2 to 3 parts per million, okay? And so it's really, really low. But there's other things in there, you know, vitamins and minerals and stuff that are added to that feed also that can be very toxic to your hands. Because, I mean, some of these mineral supplements are, God, I'll tell you what, I mean, I figured, you know what the hell the cow's eating, I'm going to taste it. Holy, I'll tell you what, I mean, it burns your tongue, some of that stuff does. but it's also in a very highly concentrated form too, see. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. You know, we often wonder about, you know, some of these stuff inducing, you know, environments for cancer to grow in. You're right. And that's something that you know, that everybody thinks about, but nobody, it's hard to prove. And you know, when it's hard to, you know, when you deal in the medical world, whether it's my world or human fields, research is something that has to be repeatable in order for it to be, you know, effective or truthful or important. And if you can't repeat certain things, you know, then you know, is it happen chance? So it gets to be tough. There's no doubt about it.
Well, that's probably why organic things have come to the front and people are interested. They want to know what they're eating.
Right,
You know.
and justifiably so, justifiably so. But there's also been some hellacious wrecks with that organic food too. You know, you look at these outbreaks of Campylobacter in this non-pasteurized milk that a lot of these people are drinking. I mean, there's other downsides to it too, and I mean, don't get, and one of the biggest problems with organic is that it's a very hard industry to control. And it's also a very hard industry to set up regulations, because what's organic in Minnesota may not be organic in Nebraska. You know, and that's one of the huge problems, because they've been discussing that in our field for a long time, and there's, you know, because out on the West Coast there's a lot of that, and a lot of those. In fact, we had one veterinarian talk at the meeting that's what he does, is he has to go around and certify these farms, and I mean it's a rigorous program for them to get involved in if they do it properly. And so it varies. And like I said, what's organic here may not be organic someplace else. So, and I mean, you're right. You know, heck, we all want to eat the best. You know, eat the best stuff. So.
Well, and even processing, like particularly chickens, you know, some people say don't eat anything but golden plump because their factories are cleaner. Well, how do we know?
Well, trust me, I've been in a lot of slaughterhouses, because we had a whole week of rotation of that when I was a student, and I was in hog slaughterhouses. I was in a monster slaughterhouse. We spent 2 days in there. Montfort's. This guy was killing over 800 cattle an hour in this plant, and then we were in a turkey processing plant, and then we were down in Denver at a kosher kill. And that was interesting. But I mean, and these federal veterinarians that are in charge of these outfits, I'll tell you, there's not much slides by these guys. There's some sharp individuals, and you know, cleanliness and stuff like this is a huge factor. And so I think, oh yeah, no, it's the thing that can't be controlled is a lot of like some of these outbreaks that we've seen with like lettuce, you know, the E. coli outbreaks. A lot of that comes on the product to the place where it's processed, you know, and so it's not necessarily the processing plant that causes the problem. So it's a tough deal, and I mean they're on it pretty hard too, and they don't mess around. I'll tell you, these guys. One veterinarian I was with down there at school, I don't know what this guy ever did. He was the nicest guy in the world. But every slaughterhouse we walked into, I mean to say these people were damn near on their knees to this guy. Because he has the ability to walk in there and turn a switch and shut that plant down right now. Period. No questions asked, no nothing. I mean, these guys got some power. And that's one of the reasons why, is because they are dealing with, you know, like I said, at Montfort meatpacking plant, they were killing 800 cattle an hour for 16 hours a day. So it's, you know, you've got to be able to keep your stuff up to the level, because I mean that's a lot of meat going through there.
What I think is so terrible when they put chickens in these little cages and they can't move, and then they you know, lay eggs and it's all, you know, whatever. Has that changed?
It is. In fact, some states have you know, they haven't outlawed the crates because chickens are interesting. I mean, they're some mean birds. Holy hell. You see some of these farms, you go out there and here's a little naked chicken here, boy. I mean, she ain't got a feather on her. You know, and I mean, so lots of times, you know, that cage basically is as much protection as anything else because they're in a high stress environment. But a lot of them have gotten bigger, just like with the farrowing crates for dogs. A lot of them have gotten bigger, and it's because of the public's demand. In fact, was it Chipotle or one of those big outfits said they won't buy, you know, pigs from these outfits that don't have certain type of pens for these pigs to run in. They won't buy it. So, I mean, if you're producing, you know, food for a company like Chipotle and they cut you off, that hurts. So you're going to do something different. But yeah, it's checked. Yeah, Rose.
I think you want to wrap it up, but I've got a couple of Dr. Mike stories. But the one thing is that when you referred to going into a horse barn with the better ventilation, I helped do the story with Dr. John. And the thing is, I walked into their main part of the barn where they greeted the guests or the buyers. Beautiful furniture, carpeting and everything. My allergies kicked in like wild until we walked into the foaling barn where the ventilation was so good. So therefore it was like maybe I should live in the barn. And the other part was that we have an old barn cat that comes up to the door every morning when I'm going to feed horses. And I look at that old barn cat, and he wouldn't be an old barn cat if Dr. Mike hadn't taken care of a tumor. So every morning I'm thinking of you, Mike. And when we had to put a dog down, we're in and Mike is doing the job for us. I'm crying, but your staff is crying too. I mean, how sweet. Yeah, just very sweet, so thanks.
All right. I guess Rod wants me to throw me out of here. You probably didn't have one of those sheep hooks, you know. All right, thanks, folks.
Thanks, Dr. Mike. Did you have something?
I was just going to share a funny that you
All right.
see sometimes at the vet. He has some clients that he does drive-through service. And somebody will pull in with a horse trailer with a couple of horses or animals in the back, and he'll come out and check them and give them their shots. And it's kind of funny seeing them walking around in the parking lot.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Nice to have.
All right. Very interesting. Thanks again, Mike. Give him another round of applause. Appreciate just taking the time to be here with us today.